wanted to give you the latest updates into the OceanGate Titan submersible implosion, and then we'll take a look at what the current status of the investigation is, who is in charge, what they are saying so far, and who has custody of the debris and what was brought up from the wreck of the Titanic site. I want to show you some rare and obscure photos and video of the Titan under construction that you probably haven't seen before, or in anybody else's videos for that matter. Now, one of the burning questions that's still dogging all of us right now is, where is that acrylic porthole window and who has it? Do they know where it is? That all sort of ties in with who's in charge of the investigation right now and what the current status is. Maybe a couple of more clues here in this periodic update filing that was just filed with the federal court the other day. Check this out. So what we're looking at is a periodic report that was filed last week in federal court by, as you can see right here, RMS Titanic Incorporated. RMS Titanic Incorporated is the entity that owns all the rights and everything to go down and touch the Titanic. And you have to go through federal court, I imagine, or go through them to get permission to go down there to do anything. And so they filed this report here about the Titan submersible. So it's right here in this report that they announced to the court that P.H. Nargeolet was an employee of theirs, and of course a friend to many of them that knew him. It says here they have been revisiting how and why PH participated in this expedition while he served as an employee of RMS Titanic. So they're announcing their official position on it, that PH was merely a guest on the expedition and did not participate as an agent of RMS Titanic. RMS has never endorsed tourist dives at the wreck. PH's love and passion for the Titanic drove him to Titan, and OceanGate welcomed him as a true expert. Because he was RMST's full-time director of underwater research, the company gave him dispensation to participate as a guest on the OceanGate expedition. So right here, they're basically trying to distance themselves from being in any way entangled or involved with OceanGate. They are trying to avoid being caught up in a major scandal. Now, just watch this. This is where it starts to get interesting. In May of 2021, David Kincannon, he's the Esquire counsel to OceanGate, he filed, you have to basically go through the court there to get permission to go down to the Titanic. So what happened was this lawyer switched sides from working for RMS Titanic to now representing OceanGate, and he described it in detail, blah, 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 engineering and evaluation work performed by Boeing company under contract to OceanGate, and he threw out other terms like detailed engineering and development work under a company issued $5 million contract to the University of Washington's Applied Physics Laboratory, a Space Act contract with NASA for advanced designed work here on the carbon fiber hull. These representations convinced RMS Titanic to approve PH's participation in the OceanGate expedition, believing Titan was properly designed and developed. And here's the really damning evidence right here. You may have probably heard this already, but here's where it is officially. This is RMS Titanic is saying it now appears that certain entities, including Boeing and University of Washington, are disputing the representations that Mr. Kincannon made in the letter filed with the court. The company will continue looking into these matters and report back as appropriate. So basically, RMS Titanic is the sole salver in possession since 1994. Everything you do has to go through them. So RMS Titanic, in their filing, had referred to this article from Friday, June 23rd on CNN Investigates that said here, OceanGate appears to have overstated its relationships with two institutions widely respected for their innovation, Boeing and University of Washington. And it says right here, both Boeing and UW denied partnering with OceanGate in the development of the Titan. So I guess this seems to indicate that Stockton Rush, the CEO of OceanGate, was lying to people about who was really involved in the engineering of the Titan submersible in order to give it street credit, when in reality he was probably the one driving everything and not listening to anybody. Okay, now I want you to look at this statement here and let me know in the comments below, do you think that this could be that acrylic window? It says here that MBI recovered most of the remnants of Titan, leaving two pieces for potential future recovery. And then here's that eerie part that we heard the Coast Guard say before. It says the remnants that were recovered contain presumed human remains. The U.S. Coast Guard is working with a medical examiner to identify the remains and return them to the victims' families. So what do you think about that, huh? Do you think that maybe one of those two pieces might be our missing acrylic window there? So that's what I'm wondering, because either the window was the cause of the implosion, ocean and it's in, who knows, in pieces, or it was a victim of the implosion and maybe it just got blown out of that porthole dome and it's resting on the ocean bed below. Let us know what you think. And then also, is that all that was left down there? Maybe there's a lot more pieces. Maybe in just the limited time that they were down there before they had to come back home, maybe that's all they saw. But there's probably a lot more down there is my guess. Also, if you're available this coming Wednesday, July 19th, 2023, you'll see that they're going to have a memorial ceremony for P.H. Nargeolet. It will be live streamed here on the RMS Titanic Incorporated Facebook page. As a matter of fact, I just realized I have P.H. Nargeolet's autograph here. Probably over 20 years ago, I bought some sample of Titanic coal. Yes, this is real coal that P.H. Nargeolet brought up himself from the wreckage site of where the Titanic now lies at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. Now, before any of you start coming in and coming off your high horse and being self-righteous and saying, oh, grave robbers, you know what? This was sitting on the ocean floor away from the Titanic. That's where they grabbed a lot of this coal and they brought it up and they sold it in these little chunks like this. And each piece of coal came with a certificate of authenticity, and P.H. Nargeolet, his signature is right here on there. So you are looking here at a real live piece of Titanic coal. And then today in the news, LBC published a headline here that says OceanGate boss Stockton Rush hired cheaper mothership for Titan sub to be dragged across the rough seas. Now you remember that Polar Prince boat, that was the topside support vessel for the Titan sub. That was a decommissioned Canadian Coast Guard icebreaker, and it was smaller and older than many of the other boats in the past that Stockton Rush had commissioned during previous dives to take the boat. In fact, on other dives like you see on this one here from the one that the BBC filmed last year, they used to transport the Titan sub with its launch platform on top of the boat and then slide it down the ramp into the water. But he started to get really cheap here and all of a sudden finds this cheap boat, the Polar Prince, and now he's dragging the Titan behind him on the platform. Their last Titanic expedition in May, the one that got canceled, Jake from DallMyD Channel, and everybody there was reporting that during that attempted dive that got canceled, and he's lucky to be alive. But again, on that same dive, they were dragging the Titan behind the Polar Prince on the platform for hundreds of miles across the ocean, and this thing's bouncing around and getting tossed and turned. So do you think could that have given us any contributing factors to this implosion, to the demise of the Titan sub? So you have this sub and it's bouncing around like this, like crazy on this platform, dragged across the waves. Remember folks, you can't ignore vibration. Back when I was an engineer at Motorola, we used to test our radio phones on these big vibration tables like this and shake them like crazy to make sure that they could handle actually transported by trucks. So you need to know how well is your product going to do during the shipping and transportation phase of it. So you never can predict what can go wrong. I mean, all sorts of things can happen. Electronics can get shaken and maybe something comes loose, or something inside that you don't see gets banged loose. Strange things can happen from vibration. Now, in that same federal filing last week, RMS Titanic Incorporated gave us a more detailed photograph here showing the entire Titanic wreck, showing both the bow and the stern in relation to the Titanic sub debris field. And this is more detailed than the previous photograph that we saw last week, where they just showed the Titan debris field in relation to the Titanic bow. Okay, so as we examine the more detailed photo a little closer, the Titan debris field is here. The Titanic bow section is here, about 400 or 500 yards away. There's your hatch cover. And then about a half a mile away is the stern section right here, but it's all messed up because of the way it landed. All your boilers are over here. And what I'm assuming here, now we got pieces of the double hull are over here as well, and the deck house. But I believe this drop weight area is where the submersibles are supposed to drop their weights from the ballast. And that's probably what these other arrows are pointing to here, drop weight zones. So over the years, as different submersibles have gone down to the Titanic to do their little expeditions, they have to drop those ballast weights somewhere, and you want to make sure that you're far enough away from the Titanic that you don't cause any damage. Here's some more of those Titan submarine manufacturing photos that I told you about earlier that you might not have seen before. Here's the aft titanium dome being inspected. And this is an amazing photo. This is the steel mandrel being pulled out of the Titan carbon fiber cylinder after it's been cured. You can see they're pulling it up by these gigantic chains, and it takes an immense amount of energy to pull that thing out of there. Now, you remember in our previous videos where we showed you how they spun up the carbon fiber onto the cylinder here with the hoop spun method, and they wrapped it around that steel mandrel. And so here they're just pulling out that mandrel. And now with the steel mandrel pulled out, there's the cylinder being delivered. And that green stuff that you see on the inside is likely the mold release material that we saw on the previous video there. And then on the cylinder at the seam with the titanium rings, you can see they put this polyurethane seal, some type of seal on there. We don't know how well it held up under the pressure or whether it caved under the pressure. We simply don't know at this point. But this is standard practice, and I believe even the Navy does this as well. And then here is that acrylic porthole window, the mystery window that everybody's wondering about. It's so heavy that it takes 3 guys here to lift this thing with suction cups. And I'm wondering why, again, on a manufacturing job, should they be using gloves? I would love to see the spec sheet on this thing to see how heavy that is. This does not look like something that would cave in on an implosion. It just looks so thick. Now here they're getting ready for that insert to slide it into the cylinder so they can start attaching all the electronics. And here they've started the process now to insert that inner liner into the cylinder that everything will be attached to. That's where all the computers and the brackets and everything will be attached to this. Here you can see the titanium rings have arrived on the pallets, and here they are inspecting them. And then the titanium nose cone is here too, being inspected. And then here is sort of the beginning of the skeleton with the frame assembly around the cylinder with the titanium domes already attached on the ends. Now I want you to take a look at this quick interview with Karl Stanley. This was shot by Ace. He's a YouTube vlogger that does travels around the Caribbean. I'll put a link to the entire interview for you down below in the video description. But just check out some of these snippets here from it. Karl Stanley was an advisor to Stockton Rush and went down on his sub back in 2019, and he had quite a bit of things to say about it. You're not going to believe his insights on this.
You get on the ship, it's off the coast of Bahamas.
Marsh Harbor.
And how deep do you go?
Roughly 12,500.
And you hear the noise. And are you calm?
You know, I mean, it started, I don't remember the exact depth. I've 4 emails that I've had back and forth with him to different news agencies, including the New York Times just had a front page piece on that. By reviewing my emails, it made noise for most of the trip, obviously the most, or when we were the deepest. And more troubling aspect was it even made noise all the way up to 300 feet from the surface on the way back up, which means there was stored energy in there which was releasing, you know, the hull was getting mashed up, and that was only on the second dive. I told him that the hull was breaking up, that even if he was able to, I told him he didn't have a marketable product. I remember that was one sticking point. Like, he wanted to continue with diving,
right,
and just monitoring the sounds and, you know, tell his customers what to expect, and, you know, he thought that he was going to be able to be fine. The way the sounds were so loud and how much people were spending to be there, I made it very clear to him I didn't think that he had a marketable product, because people would not be willing to spend that much money to hear those kinds of sounds. He quite literally had never done 2 consecutive dives without having a major system failure. He had no business bringing that thing out into the middle of the North Atlantic. In the last week, I've learned a lot more what kind of financial pressure he was under. The fact that he was giving away seats to YouTubers.
Yeah, Mr. Beast,
he offered and he turned them down.
That was recently.
Yeah.
Mr. Beast could have been on that boat.
And
actually.
There was
and then
I don't even know that he did 20%. So it's industry standard.
Right.
Test your vessel 20% deeper than what you plan to go.
Right.
I've done that. That's what they do with all classified subs in pressure chambers.
Right.
I see no evidence that he even ever did that.
The material he was using, that was part of the reason why a lot of people are talking.
If he had made it out of something other than carbon fiber, he would probably still be alive. Carbon fiber does have the best strength to weight ratio. However, we need to do more. A lot more research has to be done. I'm also very distressed to see that the videos I've now seen of the hull being made, they show it. Seeing now, I honestly believe that the more information comes out, we're going to see that he did a shockingly small amount of test or model testing or engineering or, I mean, it sounds like he spent more money suing his engineers to shut up than he did actually paying engineers to do testing.
Okay, so here's who is in charge of the investigation. So the United States Coast Guard sort of spearheaded this with some international partners, and this began with what's called a Coast Guard Marine Board of Investigation. The MBI is the highest level of investigation that they do, and this came straight from the top with a convening order here on June 23rd. And in this memorandum, they ordered this investigative panel to be formed with Captain Jason Newbar as the chairman. Okay, the Coast Guard's other partners here in this investigation are the National Transportation and Safety Board here in the U.S., but the Coast Guard is the lead on this one. You have the Transportation Safety Board of Canada, the Marine Accident Investigation Branch in the government of UK, and then over in France, they're involved as well. This is the French Marine Casualties Investigation Board. So these are your four partners that are going to be involved in this. Now, who has what? When they arrived in port of Newfoundland in Canada with all of the wreckage from the Titan submersible, it was immediately transferred onto a Coast Guard cutter, and it was transported down to Newport, Rhode Island. And I'm looking here at their map. It doesn't look like there's much of a base there at all. So my thinking is that they probably have everything locked up in a warehouse somewhere, and we do know that they probably took the chunk of the chassis that has the presumed human remains over to a coroner somewhere for their investigation. The text, any audio files, any logs that they had back and forth between the Polar Prince and the Titan submersible down below, all of that stuff was sent over to Canada's Transportation Safety Bureau office in Ottawa. Well, there's a lot of detail so far in this video, and believe me, we have lots more that we're working on. So thanks for sticking around so far, and make sure you're subscribed so that you can be ready when the next one comes. So thank you so much for joining us, folks, and we'll see you on the next one.